Hey, I'm Scott, and this is the third video in a little series to introduce the new Pons pan and tilt motor modules from Zeapon for their Micro 2 sliders. In this video, we'll talk about how these new modules work together with the mobile app. Also, when I have a chance to get out and shoot some more interesting shots with this, I'll add a fourth video to this playlist with a collection of sample footage using a wide angle shot, using very close-up shots, time lapses, panoramas, and more, just so you can see how this slider performs in real life. But for now, let's get into it. Alright, before diving in, I just want to once more disclose that this video is sponsored by Zeapon, and please keep in mind that it's meant as an instructional video, not a review. If you want to see my thoughts on this system, I have made several reviews before. I'll add a playlist down below. I'll also have links down there to the previous videos in this series where you can see more basics about this, the kits that are available, the pricing, as well as how to set it up and operate it using the physical controls on the motors. Okay, so this is the Zeapon Lab app, which is available for iPhones and Android. I'm on an iPhone, and please don't ask me any questions about Android. I have no idea. If anything is giving you a hard time though, check that the app is up to date and that the firmware for your motors are all up to date as well. I do have another video showing you how to do that with the older USB method for the actual slider motor, for example. But it's pretty easy with the app for these new motors. There's really not much to it. Anyway, on this homepage, you'll need to get connected with each of your motors one by one just by tapping on them as they show up. And as you can see, my app has already connected. So after you do this once, it will automatically connect each time you turn on. But I'll go ahead and clear these so that way I can show you exactly what it looks like. Tap rail slider, and then tap the one that's available right there. The little green dot means that it's connected, but we'll just wait for that little swirly thing to disappear. Go back, click on heads, and we can see that there are two heads there, the tilt and the pan. They're both listed as Pons pan because they are identical. Click one. We're connected. Wait till the little swirly thing goes away. Click the other. Connected. And now once that swirly thing goes away, we can go back into our home page. And then once you're connected, just click done down the bottom to go into your controls page. Again, I have another video linked below, of course, which goes really in depth into this app. So today we'll just kind of breeze through the basics and highlight the things that maybe we couldn't do before without these extra motors. So down on the bottom right, we have our joystick for the slider left and right motion. And now on the left, we have a virtual joystick for our pan motion as well as tilt built into one joystick. Right next to that, we can also click to lock the pan motor, for example, if we don't want to accidentally make any changes to that and only want to control the tilt motor. Up top, you have your waypoints to set points along the path for your camera movement. And you also now have a clear all button, so you don't have to go in and tap each and delete each of them individually like you did before. You'll want to get your camera set, and that means all three axes pointing where you want them to before clicking your first point, your A point. We'll say that my camera is positioned as I want it now and click A. Now you'll move all three motors where you want them to be for your second point before clicking on the B waypoint. So let's do that. We'll slide it over here and we'll adjust the tilt a little bit as well as the pan. And then click B. If you make a mistake and want to delete just one of these waypoints, you can long push on it and it will give you the option to do that, so you don't have to clear them all every time. Also remember that setting some waypoints is necessary before moving on to some of the other pages, like motion time-lapse for example. But for normal or looped motion, we'll stay in this page, and before we do that, we can adjust our speed right here. You can go slower, for example, and you'll see that the time in the top right corner is calculated for you how long it will take with this speed to move the distance that you set for your A and B points. If we go up faster, we can see it goes down to 6.4 seconds. And also notice that now if I boost this up further to 81%, for example, our playtime still stays pretty close to that 6.2 seconds because with the speed, the maximum speed of the pan or the tilt motor, for example, there's kind of a hard limit about how fast you can move between certain points. So depending on how far away your points are, how much you moved them, there's going to be kind of a hard limit. If you keep raising your speed and that playtime doesn't get any faster, that's why. So then you'll just choose if you want to loop the motion or not down at the bottom. and click play. And keep in mind that now we have the B waypoint selected, so our motion will start from that point and move to point A. We're already at point B, so if I click play, it'll just go through my path right there over to point A. Now if I want to do that again, if I click play, first it will move over to point B, and then it will start our motion at the speed that we have selected. There we go. You can also set more than 2 waypoints. So if we move even further over here, and we'll make some more little adjustments, we'll move down, for example, then we can add that as point C. And remember, I'm at point C now, so if I click play, it will start just right from there. And you'll notice as I do that, that there's currently a kind of slight pause between each of the waypoints. Don't worry too much about that. Zeapon will update the firmware soon to make sure that that movement is smooth and continuous. So down here at the right, you've got the options for different pages. Remember that the intelligent time-lapse, the customized time-lapse, and the stop motion will work pretty much the same as before. Again, check the video in the playlist down below to see all of that explained in a lot more detail. The only change is that your A and B or C and D points can now have 3 axes of motion between them instead of just the slider. But the 360 panorama mode, the matrix mode, and camera mode, which I don't have that time-lapse trigger yet on the camera, are new with these new motors. These also don't necessarily need the slider to be on to work, and as you can see in the little description, it does say that it's only suitable for heads. I have it mounted on the slider now. It shouldn't make much of a difference, but the only things that will move are the pan and tilt heads. So now let's jump into the panorama mode, and the settings, there are a bunch of them, but they're pretty straightforward. Up top, you'll just choose your sensor size. So for me, I am on a 35mm full frame. You've got some other options down here, of course, depending on your camera. You can choose the scale you will be photographing. I'm just going to choose 3:2. And then you choose your lens focal length. Right now I've got a 35mm lens mounted. You can set your shutter time. You'll want to match this to your camera. So I will set it for, my camera's on 1/125th of a second right now. You can turn noise reduction on or off. I don't have it on right now. And it will show you how many photos it's going to take based on those parameters that you input. So you kind of choose all of these things which are just factual. For example, your sensor size and your lens focal length. The only thing you can really have any variation here is your shutter time, and that's just going to be depending on where you are and what your settings are. Just match it in the app, and then it will show you down below. It'll calculate that out, how many photos and how long the whole process will take. So if we click the shutter button down at the bottom, you can maybe see the camera moving as it starts to take those photos. And remember that this is just a panorama, so the tilt motor is not doing anything right now. It's just spinning around and it will take all those photos. Also, do keep in mind that right now it takes a full 360-degree panorama. Hopefully in the future they'll edit that so you have some options for less than that. Of course, you don't have to use all of the photos. And on that note, you do also have to stitch these together yourself in some sort of software after you take the photos off of your camera. You know, it doesn't do any magic processing the photos inside of your camera for you. So it's just taking the photos and calculating out that interval between the shots to get pictures that should be pretty reasonable in terms of stitching together. You'll probably also want to make sure that your camera is level for this, which mine obviously is not right now. But yeah, that's how the panorama page works. So if we move over to the matrix mode here, it's very, very similar. Again, you're going to enter your sensor size. You'll enter the photographic mode, the aspect ratio you're in, and you'll set your focal length. And then down here, you can set your shutter time. Again, we'll match that setting that I have dialed in on my camera right now. And it will tell you how long your wait time is. You can also turn on or off noise reduction, maybe if you have a very slow shutter speed, for example. and it will show you down here how many photos it'll calculate out for you horizontally and vertically to make up that matrix. Let's go ahead and click the shutter button, and you'll see my camera move. This is now moving the pan and tilt motors to get those photos. I think my camera died, but you get the idea. This last page, camera mode, is, like I said, to work together with the time-lapse trigger that Zeapon released, which is this guy right here that slides into your hot shoe on your camera. So the reason for this is that when you use one of those first couple pages to set up either an intelligent time-lapse or a custom time-lapse, things like your shutter speed are set. They're dialed in and they match the movement of the slider. So automatic modes that change or adjust your shutter speed on your camera, like aperture priority mode, when light changes, will cause problems where the slider moves in the middle of actually taking a photo because that shutter speed doesn't match the timing of the movement of the slider anymore. So with this new accessory, you slide it into your camera's hot shoe and the camera kind of recognizes it like a flash. So you set the camera's flash settings to rear curtain sync. So that way it's going to send a signal to the slider at the right time, which is after your shutter is closed so it can move. And then that signal will tell the slider you're ready to move, instead of the other way around where the slider and the app are dictating the movement in the photos. The slider won't move until the camera says that it's ready. So even if your shutter speed changes, it won't ruin the photo because the camera will always tell the slider when it finished taking a photo and when that shutter closed. So once you've got that new trigger on your camera and everything set up, let's just go back to video mode and back out. And now here on the home page, just like connecting to the motors, you can connect to that new trigger. Now when we go into the app, we have the option of using this last page here. And with this, you will have to set up the time lapse on your camera because, again, the camera is going to take the photo and then tell your slider when to move. And you'll just want to make sure that when you set that up, you match the settings that you set in the app. And then you should be all set, even for time lapses with changing light and therefore changing camera settings like shutter speed. So I've gone ahead and set up interval shooting, the time lapse in my camera. I just set it for 30 photos right now. My final result I'll just put in 24 frames per second. So it will show me, this is just to calculate for your imagination, I guess, with 30 photos with making a 24 frames per second video, that'll end up being a 1.2 second time lapse. Of course, if I change this to 30 frames per second, for example, those 30 photos I take with 30 frames per second timeline will play out at 1 second exactly. So this frames per second is just for you to kind of mentally calculate the amount of time that it will take for the final video, the final time lapse to play through. So we'll click the shutter button here so that way the app is ready and it will tell you to go ahead and press the shutter button on the camera to start shooting. Click OK and you can see that it's waiting. We'll press the shutter on the camera here. And of course, right now my shutter speed is not changing because the light's not changing. But again, if you put this into aperture priority mode and the light changes and your shutter speed changes, then again, right now the camera is controlling everything. The camera will tell the slider when to move because of that new time-lapse trigger on there. And again, the app doesn't magically make your camera process these photos for you. So just as with the original time-lapse modes and just as with the panorama modes, this will take the photos and then you need to take them into some kind of software and stitch them together or put them together into a video timeline. So that way you can actually use them, and that's the same process as a typical time-lapse. And so that's about it. I hope that I covered everything I haven't already talked about in previous videos, but let me know if there's anything that you need clarified down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. And do remember that as soon as possible for the final video in this series, I'll put together a few slider sample clips, parallax shots, time lapses, panoramas, and things like that, nothing special, but I'll include wide shots, near macro shots, and a few in between, so that way you should get a good idea of how the slider actually performs. Again, also check out my earlier videos for more details about the app, the firmware update process, the Micro 2 Plus slider itself, and a lot more. For now, thanks for watching.